Hello everyone, I'd like to talk to you about your literature review paper that is coming up to be due. I know some of you may have some questions on which direction you want to examine fiscal stress from, and the purpose of the literature review is really to take a broad approach to understanding the issue of assessing financial conditions, the various components of why governments do it, some of the factors that impact a jurisdiction's financial condition, what are some common trends, and I'll discuss that right now. And the literature review leads into your research paper. So the way I look at this and the way I think that you should approach this paper, this literature review, is to take a very broad perspective on assessing financial conditions, and that perspective can entail many different ways to look at this situation. So first I would start with the articles that were made available on Blackboard under the tab that's titled Literature. You'll be able to get an understanding of what are some of the key terms, what are we really referring to when we say assessing financial conditions. One quick way to think about it is to when you have a physical at the doctor's office, you go there and the doctor may, obviously they take your temperature, your blood pressure, they weigh you, they take some blood, and they really determine, what is your actual physical condition. In this case, we're looking at the fiscal condition, so the financial condition of a jurisdiction, whether that be a local government, state, or even the national government. And there's been a lot of research on this area, so finding articles will not be an issue. Some people have looked at assessing financial conditions from the perspective of why it's important, why jurisdictions should be keenly aware of their fiscal condition. As you see from this week's reading, the article that looks at the local government commission in North Carolina. The rationale for establishing that commission dates all the way back to the 1930s, right after the Great Depression, and seeing many localities in the state of North Carolina fall into bankruptcy or default, which forced or at least made the legislature there realize the importance of having an oversight commission, an oversight agency to help local communities perform better and not fall into bankruptcy. You also have another large set of the literature examines indicator systems. So for many years, different scholars, and not only just scholars, but public managers have tried to develop a way to measure the fiscal condition of their jurisdiction. And the measurement can take on many different forms. I think one of the articles that is available on Blackboard is by Rebecca Hendrick, and she looks at the socioeconomic conditions of the jurisdiction to see what impact it may have on their fiscal condition. For the most part, though, the measures that are utilized are the common fiscal benchmarks. You may have let's say the common size ratios, which is a very basic way to approach this. And you look at the assets and liabilities from the CAFR report and see where the percentage of funds are being utilized in regards to those different items. You also can look at common size ratios. I'm sorry, not common size ratios. Liquidity ratios, where you're looking at the assets over liabilities, and that's drilling down a little bit further. In the Wang Dennison 2 article and the Maher and Deller article, they look at some of those ratios and some of those tried and true fiscal conditions, so to speak, to assess or fiscal variables to assess the conditions in various jurisdictions. There's obviously pros and cons to that type of approach. Another article that's available is by Brown, where he develops a 10-point system or a 10-point test to determine the condition of jurisdictions. In his particular article, I believe the threshold, though, is jurisdictions that have a population of 50,000 people or less. So you'll see a lot of different approaches to assessing financial condition, and at this point, I want you to look at these different methodologies. Think about what really speaks to you, which approach you think is most beneficial, or you think that you'd want to emulate. Um, and then in terms of your actual paper, so then you get into what will you actually be discussing in terms of assessing financial conditions. Is it the historical approach to assessing financial conditions? Is it more or less the rationale for the need to do that? Is it based on these indicator systems? And then obviously when you look at the indicator systems, what type of approach to examine the indicator systems, or what variables would you include in that measurement tool? Um, and then obviously from there, after you explain the direction of your paper, you also want to discuss why is this particular area of assessing financial conditions important. Why is it important for local governments? Why is it important for the residents of the community, of the business community, public managers, all the normal constituencies that you could think of. And then, through the actual review of the literature, you want to find similar articles that show, or at least tell us, what are other scholars talking about in terms of, let's say, fiscal stress. Um, what have Marlowe and Ross talked about in terms of fiscal stress, for example? What are some common trends? Where does the future lie in defining fiscal stress, and what is likely to occur in the future for local governments who are on the precipice of fiscal stress? And in a similar vein, how can you avoid that particular element so that your jurisdiction doesn't become fiscally stressed? So as you begin looking at the research and drilling down, if you do have questions, certainly feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to help you out. I've done a bunch of research in this area and presentations on fiscal stress and assessing financial conditions. And even now, we're looking at developing a mechanism, a financial indicator mechanism, to hopefully predict hospital closures. Because there's a higher increase lately of hospitals that are closing, community hospitals in particular, that are closing because of their finances. Again, this literature review will lead into your financial condition research paper. And again, if you do have any questions, be sure to let me know, and I can help you out in framing your argument and narrowing down the focus of this literature review. All right, thank you.